Evy Poumpouras begins by drawing a clear line between bringing your authentic self to work and your professional self. She emphasizes that while the concept of bring your authentic self is trendy, in professional environments, this often translates into self-centered behavior where individuals focus excessively on their own problems and emotions. In her view, the workplace requires a genuine, competent, and mission-oriented approach that transcends personal baggage and entitlement. Unlike in personal settings, such as family gatherings, where authenticity is encouraged, the work environment demands a mindset aimed at contributing value and respecting the collective goals. This distinction is especially critical when working within high-performance teams, as Evie notes from her experience with former U.S. Secret Service agents and military elites. She argues that authenticity in a professional setting should be anchored in responsibility, steady demeanor, and emotional regulation, rather than emotional reactivity or self-involvement. She draws from her experience interrogating criminals, explaining that showing judgment or unfiltered personal emotion only hinders gathering information. Thus, in highly demanding environments, professionalism equates to emotional self-control and prioritizing the mission over the self. A core theme Evie returns to is the importance of being a self-regulator of emotions, a skill that can be learned and refined. She recounts how she once struggled with impulsivity and anger, but learned to manage that by surrounding herself with emotionally stable mentors and peers during her NYPD and Secret Service careers. This emotional governor enables one to maintain composure in the heat of the moment, which is a key factor in making effective decisions and projecting confidence. Confidence itself, Evie contends, is rarely about overt displays or constant self-praise. Rather, it is a quiet assurance that emerges when one trusts their own judgment and makes decisions with imperfect information. She highlights that confident people accept not knowing everything, delegate wisely, and avoid decision fatigue by simplifying their mental load. Drawing on examples like President Obama's use of the same suit daily to minimize trivial decisions, she illuminates the practical side of confidence as a combination of mental discipline and emotional control rather than ego-driven bravado. Evie introduces an insightful metaphor comparing the human brain to a bathtub with limited capacity. She explains cognitive load as the water filling the tub, a finite resource that constrains a person's ability to process information and make decisions. When this bathtub overflows, individuals become inefficient, stressed, and prone to poor choices. This model underscores the critical need to manage mental input deliberately, removing unnecessary distractions so energy can be focused where it counts. The idea of decision fatigue naturally follows. Confident leaders and agents must decide when to conserve mental resources and when to act decisively. Evie stresses that great leaders, including presidents she protected, mastered the art of delegating tasks and filtering inputs, allowing them to keep their bathtub light and make clearer, more impactful decisions. Therefore, good leadership isn't about knowing everything, but about managing what to know and when to act, which is a valuable lesson for listeners striving to improve in any domain. Throughout the conversation, Evie explores how people often anchor their current identity to past traumas or experiences, which, while initially helpful for self-understanding, can become a long-term trap. She explains that using the past as a fixed diagnosis, "I am this way because of what happened to me," can limit one's ability to change and grow. This cognitive fixation acts like cement, solidifying behavioral patterns that may no longer serve, even when they cause unhappiness. Evie illustrates this with stories, including one of a friend who clings to a victim identity formed decades ago due to racial abuse. Even after the environment changed, this friend continued to seek out adversaries to sustain this narrative, leading to alienation from family. The phenomenon she identifies as secondary gain, whereby pain and trauma also provide a kind of psychological comfort zone or identity that people become addicted to. Moving beyond this requires recognition, acceptance, and choosing to live in the present truth rather than past wounds. Evie shares a perspective shaped by years of protective and investigative work. Trying to change others, especially those who do not want to change, is futile and often harmful. She recounts examples such as a woman struggling to change her husband's unhealthy habits and others trapped in abusive or enabling relationships where both parties derive identity or comfort from dysfunction. In such cases, the solution isn't to fix the other person, but to accept who they are honestly. Acceptance does not mean approval or resignation. Rather, it is a realistic assessment of the present. This baseline allows individuals to decide whether they can adapt to the reality and continue in relationships or environments, or whether separation is the healthier choice. Evie cautions against imposing one's values on others and explains that trying to force change often leads to resentment and conflict, something she learned firsthand during interrogations and mentoring others. Drawing directly from her Secret Service and investigative experiences, Evie emphasizes the importance of reading people accurately, including spotting deception quickly. She discusses techniques such as observing body language, especially hand movements, and paying attention to speech patterns and microexpressions. She recounts her practice of assessing interviewees by having them read statements aloud, listening closely to language and delivery to gauge truthfulness and psychological state. Evie explains that being a good interviewer involves being a neutral slate and letting the person reveal themselves without judgment or overwhelming verbal input. Trustworthiness is conveyed not by grand gestures, but by consistency, openness, such as visible hands, and controlled voice modulation. Learning these skills, she suggests, improves not only professional effectiveness, but also personal relationships and negotiations. Evie underscores the profound influence of one's social environment on mental and emotional health. She warns that consistently surrounding oneself with low-vibration people, those who perpetually complain, play the victim, or create drama, drains energy and limits growth. Conversely, confident, steady individuals cultivate carefully selected circles that support and challenge them productively. This social awareness also extends to hiring and leadership. Evie shares her experience screening candidates for self-focus versus mission focus, recognizing that those driven by me motivations rarely succeed in intense environments like the Secret Service or high-level business roles. Instead, people who are motivated by service, contribution, and resilience tend to thrive. Choosing who to invest time and trust in is fundamental to one's own success. One of the most practically valuable sections of the podcast delves into communication tactics Evie mastered through years in law enforcement and media. She articulates how confident communicators command their voice by speaking clearly, deliberately, and with controlled tone. Deeper voices tend to command more respect. She draws attention to the power of pauses and silences, which allow listeners to absorb information and heighten engagement, contrasting sharply with those who rush through words out of nervousness or insecurity. Evie also highlights how hand gestures, when used naturally, validate openness and build trust. She contrasts this with the detrimental habit of hiding hands, often subconsciously interpreted as deceitful or uncertain. Adapting speech tempo and vocabulary to the listener's level also enhances communication, a skill that improved her interrogation outcomes and now benefits her public speaking. Learning to own one's voice and presence in conversations creates a magnetic and trustworthy persona. Confidence emerges as a recurring theme, explored from multiple angles. Evie reflects on her younger self's struggle with false confidence based merely on external achievements, explaining how true confidence is an internal state of high self-value and steady decision-making. She shares that confident individuals don't obsess over being confident, they just are, without stamping insecurity onto their every action. A significant factor in building confidence, she notes, is the habit of making decisions and trusting oneself to do so with imperfect data. Exposure to difficult situations where one must choose under pressure builds this trust internally. Additionally, deliberate practice such as consistent physical exercise and personal discipline reinforce feelings of competence and control, which in turn support confidence. Evie reinforces that confidence pays dividends in leadership, relationships, and self-advocacy. Evie touches on how being easily offended or emotionally reactive increases vulnerability to manipulation. She discusses common tactics attackers or manipulators use, such as emotional outbursts, tears, or accusations, designed to derail logical analysis and generate sympathy, forcing others to back off before the truth emerges. She explains that returning to logic and factual communication neutralizes these attempts and keeps the conversation productive. Her insights draw from extensive interrogation experience where emotional manipulation is frequent. She advocates for emotional discipline and awareness as safeguards against being exploited. Moreover, she teaches that recognizing your own triggers and biases empowers you to remain centered and maintain control over your reactions, reducing manipulation risk both in personal and professional spheres. Lastly, Evy addresses the evolving landscape of security threats in a digital and hyper-connected world. Using the recent assassination of public figure Charlie Kirk as an example, she explains how social media platforms and algorithms have intensified polarization, amplified hate, and lowered social inhibitions, leading to increased risks for public speakers and influencers. Unlike traditional political figures protected by state agencies, many influential voices today lack such protections, making them more vulnerable. She points to how algorithms predispose users to dwell on fearful or angry content, reinforcing negative worldviews that fuel extremism and violence. Moreover, the proliferation of online echo chambers erodes empathy and polarizes discourse. Evy warns of the potential for copycat attacks inspired by these dynamics,